In the sun-drenched fields bordering the bustling market town of Oakhaven lived Corvus, a crow whose feathers shimmered with an almost unnatural sheen. Corvus wasn't just any crow. He was renowned throughout the fields and forests for his sharp wit, even sharper beak, and an insatiable love for shiny objects, and more importantly, a good challenge. While other crows contented themselves with worms and discarded seeds, Corvus had a taste for the finer, more elusive things: ripe cherries from the farmer's best trees, forgotten coins, and most coveted of all, the farmer's unattended lunch. The farmer, Jedediah, was a gruff, hard-working man with a temper as fiery as his red beard. He knew of Corvus and his reputation, and the crow was a constant thorn in his side. Jedediah had tried everything: scarecrows with menacing grins, nets that tangled only leaves, and even shouting matches that left him hoarse and Corvus cawing with mocking laughter from a safe distance. One sweltering afternoon, Jedediah was particularly proud of his harvest. He had brought the sweetest, most succulent figs from his orchards to sell at the market. He carefully laid them out on a stall, a pyramid of purple delight, and then, feeling the thirst of a long morning, decided to fetch a cool drink from the well. "Just for a moment," he muttered to himself. "I'll be right back." Corvus, perched high on a nearby oak tree, watched the entire scene unfold with keen interest. His beady eyes gleamed as Jedediah walked away. Those figs! They were a legendary delicacy, guarded jealously. This was an opportunity too good to miss. But Jedediah had grown smarter. He had placed a large, shiny brass bell directly on top of the fig pyramid. The slightest movement would cause it to clang loudly, alerting him. Corvus landed silently on the stall's edge, his head tilted, studying the setup. He cawed thoughtfully. He couldn't just grab a fig. The bell would give him away instantly. He circled the stall, his mind warring. Then a mischievous glint appeared in his eye. He didn't want just one fig. He wanted to teach Jedediah a lesson, and perhaps enjoy a few more in the process. Corvus flew to a nearby patch of thorny bushes. With careful precision, he plucked several long, thin thorns, holding them delicately in his beak. He returned to the stall, not directly to the figs, but to a stack of empty market baskets nearby. Quietly, swiftly, he used the thorns to carefully unweave and reweave a small, almost invisible section of one of the basket's handles, creating a tiny, almost invisible loop. Next, he returned to the bell. He didn't touch it. Instead, he flew up to the awning above the stall, a tattered piece of canvas that flapped gently in the breeze. He landed on a loose thread at the very edge of the awning. With a tiny tug, he pulled the thread, ever so slightly, until it hung down almost imperceptibly, just above the bell. He then used a bit of sticky sap from another tree to attach a tiny, dried leaf to the end of the thread, making it almost invisible against the stall's wooden frame. Now for the grand finale. Corvus flew down to the ground, out of Jedediah's sight, but still near the stall. He then let out a single, piercing, extraordinarily loud call. Jedediah, halfway to the well, jumped, spilling half his water. "Confound that crow!" he roared, glaring back at his stall. He saw nothing amiss. The bell was silent. He grumbled and continued to the well. Corvus waited. He repeated his loud call, then darted to the hidden loop he'd made in the basket handle. Using his beak, he hooked the loose thread from the awning onto the loop. Now, any slight movement of the basket would subtly tug the thread, which would gently tug the leaf, which would barely brush the bell. He then initiated his plan. He hopped onto the market stall, not towards the figs, but towards the far end, away from the bell. With a flurry of his wings, he deliberately knocked over a pile of oranges, sending them rolling across the stall and onto the ground with soft thuds. "What in the blazes?" Jedediah shouted, rushing back. He saw the scattered oranges and his face purpled with rage. He looked directly at the bell. It was still perfectly still. "That blasted crow," he muttered, bending to pick up the oranges. As Jedediah bent down, his foot accidentally brushed the basket with the modified handle. The tiny loop tightened, tugging the thread, nudging the leaf, and ting! A barely audible chime from the bell. Jedediah froze. He looked up, his eyes narrowing, then down at the scattered oranges, then at the still, silent bell. "Must be the wind," he mumbled, unconvinced. Corvus, meanwhile, had swiftly plucked a plump fig from the pyramid, the bell remaining perfectly silent due to his earlier manipulation. He repeated the trick, nudging the basket again, causing another faint ting as he took another fig. This went on for several minutes. Jedediah would turn his back, Corvus would cleverly nudge the basket, a faint ting would sound, and he'd grab a fig. Jedediah would whip around, see nothing amiss at the bell, and mutter about drafts or phantom market spirits. By the time Jedediah finally managed to secure his oranges and straighten up, a good third of his prize figs had vanished. Corvus, perched high on the oak tree, watched Jedediah's growing confusion and frustration. He held a stolen fig in his beak, savoring its sweetness, and let out a single, triumphant, and undeniably smug caw that echoed through the market square. Jedediah stared up at the crow, then at his diminished fig pile, then at the perfectly still bell. A slow, dawning realization spread across his face, followed by a groan of exasperation. "That clever, conniving bird!" he exclaimed, shaking his fist at the sky. From that day on, Jedediah never left his stall unattended, and Corvus continued to find new and ingenious ways to outsmart the humans, a mischievous legend in the annals of Oak Haven. In the heart of the whispering woods, where ancient trees touched the sky and the air hummed with unseen life, lived Mika, a monkey with a spirit as bright as his fiery red fur. Unlike his boisterous kin, Mika found solace in quiet observation, often perched high on a sun-dappled branch, watching the world unfold beneath him. One sweltering afternoon, a tremor ran through the jungle floor. Not the usual rumble of a distant storm, but a slow, rhythmic thud. It was Ilara, a venerable elephant, whose tusk gleamed like polished ivory and whose eyes held the wisdom of 1,000 seasons. Ilara was known throughout the jungle for her gentle nature and her deep, resonant calls that carried messages across miles. Yet she was also a solitary creature, her immense size and quiet demeanor often keeping others at a respectful distance. Mika, however, felt an inexplicable pull towards her. Their first true interaction was born of necessity. A flash flood, sudden and violent, roared through a low-lying part of the jungle, trapping several smaller creatures, including a family of otters on a shrinking island of land. Mika, with his agility, could only watch in despair, his chattering cries useless against the raging water. It was Ilara who, with calm determination, waded into the torrent. Her colossal body acted as a living dam, diverting the fiercest currents, while the otters, guided by her gentle nudges, swam to safety. Mika, witnessing this act of selfless heroism, felt a profound respect blossom within him. From that day forward, an unusual friendship began to bloom. Mika, with his nimble movements, became Ilara's eyes and ears in the canopy, spotting ripe fruits on high branches or warning her of approaching predators long before she could scent them. He'd chatter excitedly, pointing with a tiny finger, and Ilara, with a soft rumble, would carefully lower her trunk to allow him to gather the choicest morsels. In turn, Ilara became Mika's protector. When a predatory jaguar once cornered Mika far from his troop, Ilara's thundering charge and trumpeting roar sent the sleek hunter fleeing, leaving Mika trembling but safe beside his colossal friend. Their bond wasn't just practical, it was deeply emotional. Mika, perched on Ilara's broad head, would regale her with tales of his mischievous exploits, his voice a rapid-fire stream of chirps and giggles. Ilara would listen patiently, her large ears occasionally twitching in amusement, her rumbling responses a soothing balm to Mika's restless energy. They found a shared joy in the simple rhythms of the jungle. The first dew-kissed dawn, the rustle of leaves in the evening breeze, the distant call of a nightingale. Ilara would often stand sentinel while Mika slept nestled between her massive feet, his tiny body safe within her shadow. But the Whispering Woods faced a new threat. A blight, a creeping vine of an unnatural, suffocating green began to spread, choking the life out of ancient trees and poisoning the river. The jungle grew sickly, its vibrant hues fading, its joyful sounds dwindling to a whisper. The elder animals, despairing, spoke of an ancient prophecy. When the small find strength in the great, and the great finds vision in the small, the heart of the jungle shall be renewed. Many scoffed, unable to fathom such an unlikely pairing. Mika and Ilara, however, felt the blight's insidious touch more keenly than most. Ilara, reliant on the water, found herself weakened by its tainted flow. Mika, watching his beloved jungle wither, felt a fear he had never known. One evening, under a sky choked with a sickly haze, Mika recalled an old legend his grandmother had told him of a hidden spring high in the treacherous silent peaks whose waters possessed the power to cleanse. But the peaks were a perilous journey, rife with jagged cliffs and venomous creatures. "We must go, Ilara," Mika chattered with his voice laced with determination. "To the silent peaks, to the cleansing spring." Ilara, despite her weakening state, recognized the desperation in his voice. With a weary but resolute nod, she began the arduous journey. The path was brutal. Ilara's immense weight made climbing the slippery slopes a dangerous undertaking, and Mika, though agile, struggled to find purchase on the sheer rock faces. It was a testament to their unwavering bond that they persevered. Mika, scampering ahead, would find the safest footholds for Ilara, guiding her with frantic gestures. Ilara, with her powerful trunk, would clear paths, dislodging boulders that blocked their way, and even lift Mika over impassable crevices. They faced venomous snakes that Mika bravely distracted, while Ilara's mighty footfalls sent them scurrying. They endured a frigid storm high in the peaks, where Ilara's vast body shielded Mika from the biting wind. Days blurred into night, marked by exhaustion and dwindling hope. Finally, through a swirling mist, Mika spotted it, a faint shimmer, a tiny waterfall cascading into a crystal-clear pool, the cleansing spring. With renewed vigor, Ilara lumbered forward, her trunk dipping into the untouched waters. As she drank, a visible light seemed to emanate from her, a vibrant energy coursing through her immense form. Mika, too, drank deeply, feeling the revitalizing power course through his small body. But their task wasn't done. They knew the spring's power needed to reach the entire jungle. Together, they began the descent, Ilara carrying Mika on her head, her steps lighter, her spirit renewed. As they neared the Whispering Woods, Mika, with a plan born of desperation and ingenuity, began to gather large, hollowed-out gourds he'd spotted on their journey. He filled them with the spring water, and then, with a mighty swing of Ilara's trunk, they sent the gourds soaring through the canopy, splashing the life-giving liquid onto the blighted trees. It wasn't enough. They needed more, much more. Then, Mika had an idea. He directed Ilara to a clearing where a vast, ancient baobab tree stood, its hollow trunk a natural reservoir. With immense effort, Ilara began to spray the precious water from her trunk onto the roots of the tree, and slowly, miraculously, the baobab tree began to absorb it, acting as a conduit. The water, infused with the spring's magic, began to spread through the jungle's intricate root system, carrying life to every corner. Days turned into weeks. The blight began to recede, its sickly green replaced by vibrant emerald. Flowers bloomed with renewed vigor. The river flowed clear and clean, and the songs of birds returned to the whispering woods. The jungle, once teetering on the brink, was reborn. Mika and Ilara, no longer just friends, but saviors, were revered by all creatures. The prophecy had come true. The small Mika, with his keen vision and quick wit, had found strength in the great Ilara, with her immense power and steadfast heart. And the great Ilara had found vision and purpose in the small. Their friendship, once an anomaly, became a legend, a testament to the fact that the most profound bonds can form in the most unexpected of pairings, and that even the smallest among us can ignite the greatest change. And so, in the heart of the revitalized Whispering Woods, the monkey and the elephant continued their quiet, extraordinary friendship, a living embodiment of the jungle's enduring magic. Once in the heart of the Whispering Woods, where ancient oaks reached for the sky and a crystal-clear stream murmured secrets to the pebbles, lived a motley collection of creatures. Among them were two unlikely friends, Barnaby, a badger, and Pip, a robin. Barnaby was a creature of the earth. His fur was a rough tapestry of black and white, his claws strong and broad, perfect for digging the intricate tunnels that formed his cozy set. He was methodical, a creature of habit, and preferred the quiet solitude of his underground home. His days were spent foraging for worms, grubs, and the occasional sweet root, and his nights were for sleeping soundly, curled up in his earthy bed. Pip, on the other hand, was a creature of the air. Bright red-breasted, with eyes like glistening beads, she flitted through the canopy, her song a cheerful, bubbling cascade. She was energetic, curious, and loved nothing more than soaring on the breeze, exploring every branch and every sun-dappled glade. Her days were a whirlwind of catching insects mid-flight and perching on the highest branches to sing her heart out. Their friendship had blossomed during a particularly harsh winter. Barnaby, being a creature of the ground, often struggled to find food when the snow lay thick and deep. Pip, though small, was nimble and could still find frozen berries clinging to branches or uncover seeds hidden beneath the snow. Seeing Barnaby's plight, she started to leave small offerings near the entrance of his set. A handful of dried berries, a few pine nuts she had carefully extracted. Barnaby, at first, was bewildered. He was used to fending for himself, but the little gifts, left silently and without expectation, warmed something within him. One crisp morning, he emerged from his set to find Pip chirping excitedly on a low branch, a plump, frozen worm clutched in her beak. She dropped it gently at his feet, then zipped away before he could even blink. From then on, a quiet understanding grew between them. Barnaby, in his own gruff way, would leave exposed earthworms near certain trees where Pip often perched, knowing how much she relished a fresh meal. He even started to recognize her unique song among the chorus of the woods, a tiny spark of warmth in his otherwise solitary existence. One spring, a great storm lashed the whispering woods. The wind howled like a banshee, tearing at branches, and the rain fell in sheets, turning the stream into a raging torrent. Pip's nest, precariously built on a slender branch, was ripped apart, sending her tiny, unhatched eggs tumbling to the forest floor. Heartbroken and soaked to the bone, she huddled, shivering beneath a large fern. Barnaby, hearing the tempest rage, felt a pang of concern for his tiny friend. He knew how vulnerable birds were in such weather. He carefully ventured out of his sturdy set, navigating the swirling chaos, his powerful nose guiding him through the rain-soaked air. He found Pip, a tiny ball of misery. Without a word, he nudged her gently towards his set. Pip, soaked and despairing, hesitated. A badger set was deep, dark, and utterly alien to her. But in Barnaby's steady gaze, she saw a genuine concern that transcended their differences. With a hesitant hop, she followed him into the cool, earthy tunnels. Inside, the set was surprisingly warm and dry. Barnaby had a chamber lined with soft moss and dried leaves. He ushered Pip towards it, then curled up in a separate corner, giving her space. For the first time in her life, Pip slept soundly, safe and protected within the earth itself. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving behind a world washed clean. Pip, though still saddened by her lost eggs, felt a profound gratitude. She flew out of the set, singing a song of pure joy and heartfelt thanks that echoed through the damp woods. Their friendship deepened after that. Pip, with her aerial view, became Barnaby's eyes in the canopy. She would warn him of approaching dangers, a fox slinking through the undergrowth, a human presence nearby. She'd even guide him to patches of particularly succulent berries or a hidden grove of delicious mushrooms. Barnaby, in turn, became Pip's protector on the ground. When a prowling cat threatened her as she foraged for crumbs, Barnaby would emerge with a low growl, sending the feline scampering. He offered her shelter in his set during sudden downpours and provided a sense of grounded security that balanced her airy existence. Their friendship became a legend in the Whispering Woods. Other animals, initially bewildered by their unlikely bond, came to admire it. The squirrels would chatter about Barnaby's steadfastness and Pip's cheerful courage. The deer would pause to watch them, the solid, earthy badger and the vibrant, sky-dwelling robin sharing a quiet moment, a silent understanding that spoke volumes. Barnaby, once a solitary and gruff creature, found a quiet joy in Pip's effervescent presence. Pip, no longer just a carefree flyer, discovered a deep comfort in Barnaby's unwavering loyalty. They were a testament that true friendship isn't about shared species or similar habits, but about shared understanding, mutual respect, and the quiet, unwavering support that binds two souls together no matter how different their worlds may be. And so, in the heart of the Whispering Woods, their unlikely friendship continued to flourish, a harmonious melody in the grand symphony of the forest.
Once upon a time, nestled in a valley where emerald hills rolled into a sapphire sky, lived a flock of sheep. Their days were a tranquil symphony of grazing on sweet clover, bleating soft melodies, and basking in the warm sun. Leading them was Alara, a ewe with wool like spun moonlight and eyes that held the wisdom of countless sunsets. She was vigilant, always aware of the shadows that danced at the edges of their peaceful world. For beyond the gentle slopes lay the untamed forest, home to a creature of cunning and hunger, the wolf. This wolf, named Fenris, was a solitary hunter, gaunt and swift, with fur the color of twilight and eyes like smoldering embers. His life was a constant pursuit of survival, a relentless ballet of tracking and preying. He watched the sheep, his hunger a gnawing ache, but Alara's careful watch and the shepherd's faithful dogs kept him at bay. He knew he couldn't simply charge in. He needed a different approach. One frigid winter, when snow blanketed the valley and food was scarce, Fenris's hunger grew desperate. He observed the sheep, noting their communal spirit, their trust in one another. An idea, cold and sharp as the winter air, began to form in his cunning mind. He began to appear, not as a predator, but as a distant, lonely figure. He would sit on a far-off hill, observing the flock, never approaching, never threatening. The younger sheep, less wary than Alara, started to notice him. "Look," one would bleat, "the wolf is just sitting there." Another, more bold, might add, "He looks so sad." Alara, however, felt a prickle of unease. She had seen too many winters to be fooled by a still posture. Yet she kept her counsel, watching Fenris with an unblinking gaze. As the weeks passed, Fenris escalated his act. He would sometimes let out a mournful howl, a sound that carried the desolation of the empty forest. He even left a small offering one day, a half-eaten rabbit near the edge of the pasture, a gesture meant to convey his own struggle for survival. Slowly, subtly, the seeds of empathy began to sprout among the flock. Some of the younger, more naive sheep started to believe Fenris was misunderstood, a victim of circumstance. "He's just hungry," they whispered. "Perhaps he's not like the others." One day, a lamb, adventurous and impulsive, wandered too far from the flock. Fenris, hidden, watched its approach. Instead of pouncing, he subtly herded it back towards the main group, disappearing before anyone could truly register his presence. The lamb, startled but unharmed, recounted its tale, and the narrative of the good wolf began to take hold. The turning point came during a fierce blizzard. The winds howled and the snow fell thick and fast. One of the older ewes, weak and disoriented, collapsed far from the shelter of the flock. Alara saw her, but the storm was too strong, the risk too great for her to venture out alone. Suddenly, a dark shape emerged through the swirling snow. It was Fenris. He approached the fallen ewe, not with the predator's crouch, but with a surprising gentleness. He nudged her, pushing her slowly, painstakingly, back towards the bewildered flock, before vanishing into the whiteout once more. The sheep were stunned. Fenris, the feared wolf, had saved one of their own. The whispers turned into open discussions. "He saved her. He's not evil after all." The sentiment grew, fueled by the relief and the genuine warmth of the saved ewe. Alara, while grateful for the ewe's rescue, felt a chill that had nothing to do with the snow. She knew the depths of a wolf's nature. This act, while seemingly selfless, felt too perfectly orchestrated. Yet the tide of opinion was against her. The flock, swept up in their newfound understanding, began to advocate for Fenris. They approached the shepherds, pleading for a truce. "He's changed," they bleated. "He's shown us kindness." The shepherds, though wary, were swayed by the sheer unanimity of the flock's pleas and the unusual tale of the rescue. They agreed to a tentative truce, allowing Fenris to approach the edges of the pasture as long as he showed no aggression. Fenris, now an accepted, albeit still distant, presence, would sometimes sit near the flock, observing them, his eyes still holding that ancient, unreadable glint. The younger sheep would even approach him, cautiously at first, then with increasing boldness, offering him scraps of grass. But one moonless night, the air grew heavy with an unfamiliar scent. Alara, her senses always attuned, felt a tremor of dread. She watched as Fenris, no longer a solitary figure, met with other shadows at the edge of the forest. The gentle wolf act had been a ruse, a sophisticated infiltration. He hadn't just saved the ewe out of kindness, he had done it to gain their trust, to dismantle their defenses from within. The next morning, the sun rose over a tragic scene. Several sheep were missing, and amidst the scattered wool and the telltale tracks, the illusion shattered. Fenris, the good wolf, had led his pack to an easy meal. The remaining sheep were heartbroken, their trust shattered, their innocence lost. Alara, her worst fears confirmed, gathered the bewildered flock. "We learned a painful lesson," she said, her voice heavy with sorrow. "Not all kindness is true kindness. Some smiles hide sharp teeth, and some gestures of peace are merely the prelude to the hunt." From that day on, the sheep were warier than ever. They rebuilt their defenses, strengthening their bonds with the shepherds and their dogs. They understood now that while compassion was a virtue, it must always be tempered with discernment, for the world held both genuine warmth and deceptive cunning. And though the memory of Fenris lingered like a cold shadow, it served as a stark reminder. Even in the gentlest of landscapes, vigilance remains the truest guardian of peace.
In the heart of a sprawling jungle, where ancient trees reached for the sky and the air hummed with life, lived a powerful lion named Raja. He was the undisputed king, his roar echoing through the valleys, a sound that commanded respect and a touch of fear. Yet even kings need counsel, and Raja had two unlikely advisors: a cunning jackal named Chalu and a humble donkey named Gada. Chalu was all sleek fur and sharper wit, always quick with a scheme or flattering word. Gada, on the other hand, was gentle and earnest, his large eyes reflecting a quiet wisdom often overlooked. While Raja valued Chalu's cleverness in matters of strategy, he found a strange comfort in Gada's unwavering honesty. One sweltering afternoon, a rumor rippled through the kingdom. A neighboring pride of lions, led by the ambitious Simba, was encroaching on Raja's hunting grounds. Raja summoned his advisors. "Chalu," Raja rumbled, his mane bristling, "what say you of this impudent Simba?" Chalu, ever the opportunist, bowed low. "My king, Simba is a fool, arrogant and blind. A swift attack, a show of your undeniable power, and he will flee like a frightened cub." Raja nodded, a flicker of satisfaction in his eyes. He turned to Gada. "And you, Gada, what is your counsel?" Gada shifted uncomfortably. "Your Majesty, while Chalu's words speak of your might, perhaps a direct confrontation is not the only path. Simba's pride is large, and a battle would mean many losses on both sides. Perhaps negotiation or a display of our kingdom's prosperity might deter them without bloodshed." Chalu snorted derisively. "Negotiation with a usurper? Gada, you speak like a timid rabbit, not an advisor to the king." Raja considered both views. While Chalu's aggressive stance appealed to his regal pride, Gada's words, though less dramatic, held a thread of truth about the cost of war. He decided to send Chalu as an envoy, believing his cunning would serve him well in intimidating Simba.
Chalu, however, saw an opportunity for self-advancement. Instead of delivering Raja's stern warning, he embellished it, painting Raja as a cruel and capricious tyrant, hoping to sow discord between the two kings and perhaps even gain favor with Simba should he prove stronger. Meanwhile, a severe drought began to grip the jungle. Waterholes dwindled and food became scarce. The animals grew restless, their murmurs reaching Raja's ears. Talu, seeing the growing unrest, whispered to Raja, "My king, the animals are ungrateful. They question your rule. We must show them who is truly in charge." Gada, however, approached Raja with a different perspective. "Your Majesty, the animals are not questioning your rule, but rather the hardship they face. Perhaps we should organize a communal effort to dig a new well or lead them to untapped water sources in the deeper parts of the jungle. A king's strength lies not just in his roar, but in his care for his subjects." Raja, torn between the two, finally leaned towards Gada's compassionate approach. He announced a plan to dig a new well, and to everyone's surprise, he led the effort himself, his powerful paws scooping earth alongside the other animals. Gada tirelessly guided them, his quiet encouragement a balm to their weary spirits. News of Raja's actions reached Simba not through Chalu's twisted words, but through migrating birds and small observant creatures. They spoke of a king who toiled alongside his subjects, not a tyrant as Chalu had claimed. Simba, though still ambitious, was intrigued. One day, while the animals were digging, a massive rock blocked their path. Everyone strained, but it wouldn't budge. Chalu, who had mostly been observing, scoffed. "It's hopeless. We need more power, more force." Bagada, after observing the rock for a while, suggested, "Perhaps, Your Majesty, if we all push together, but at different angles, with a rhythmic count, we might dislodge it." Skeptical but desperate, Raja agreed. Under Gada's patient instruction, the animals synchronized their efforts. With a final, mighty push, the rock groaned, and then, slowly, miraculously, rolled aside. A gush of cool, clear water erupted, bringing a collective cheer from the parched animals. The next day, Simba himself appeared at the edge of Raja's territory, not with a war party, but with a few of his advisors. Chalu, seeing Simba, panicked, fearing his deceit would be exposed. He tried to slink away, but Raja called him forward. Simba, looking at Raja, spoke. "Raja, I came here prepared for battle, fueled by tales of your cruelty. But I have seen your actions, seen your kingdom flourishing despite the drought, and I have heard of your dedication. My pride, too, faces hardships. Perhaps we can learn from each other." Talu's face paled. Raja, understanding the implications, fixed Chalu with a stern gaze. "Chalu, what exactly did you tell King Simba?" Under Raja's piercing stare, he stammered, his carefully constructed lies crumbling. He confessed his exaggerations, his attempts to manipulate both kings. Raja, though furious, chose wisdom over immediate anger. He banished Chalu from the kingdom, declaring that deceit had no place in his court. From that day on, Raja truly understood the meaning of kingship. He learned that true power lay not just in strength, but in compassion, honesty, and the willingness to listen to diverse perspectives. Gada, the humble donkey, became Raja's most trusted advisor, his quiet wisdom guiding the king towards prosperity and peace.
the jungle kingdom thrived, a testament to a king who had learned to distinguish between true counsel and self-serving flattery, all thanks to the unassuming wisdom of a donkey.
In the sun-baked lands of ancient Persia, where vast plains stretched to meet rugged mountains, lived a pride of lions. Among them was Zar, a lion of formidable size with a mane like a sun-kissed halo and eyes that held the ancient wisdom of his lineage. His roar could shake the very earth, and its presence commanded respect from all creatures of the wild. Across the sprawling plains, a nomadic tribe of shepherds tended their flocks. Their lives were dictated by the seasons, by the health of their sheep, and by the constant vigilance required to protect their livelihood. The chief shepherd was Kael, a man whose face was weathered by sun and wind, and whose gaze was as sharp and steady as the shepherd's crook he always carried. He loved his flock fiercely, viewing each sheep not just as a possession, but as a life entrusted to his care. For generations, there had been an unspoken, tense truce between the lions and the shepherds. The lions would hunt the wild gazelles and zebras that roamed the plains, keeping a respectful distance from the grazing sheep. The shepherds, in turn, understood the lions' vital role in the ecosystem and rarely sought to disturb them. However, if a lion dared to approach the flock, Kael and his men were ready, their dogs barking furiously, their slings and spears at the ready. One scorching summer, a severe drought gripped the land. The rivers dwindled to trickles, and the once lush plains turned to brittle, golden straw. The wild game, deprived of water and food, began to scatter, seeking sustenance in distant, uncharted territories. The lions, including Zar's pride, grew desperate. Their roars, once magnificent declarations of dominance, now held an undertone of hunger and frustration. Zar, a wise leader, knew that breaking the truce with the shepherds was a last resort. He had seen the shepherds' ferocity when their flocks were threatened, and he respected their courage. Yet his pride, especially the young cubs, were starving. He watched the plump, unsuspecting sheep with a gnawing ache in his belly. Kael, too, saw the growing desperation of the lions. He noticed their gaunt flanks, their lingering gazes. He reinforced the night watches, sharpened the spears, and kept his most vigilant dogs close. He felt the tension in the air, a silent acknowledgement that the fragile peace was on the brink of shattering. One sweltering evening, as the last sliver of sun dipped below the horizon, a young, reckless lioness from Zar's pride, driven by the piercing cries of her hungry cubs, broke ranks. She bypassed Zar's silent command and, swift as a shadow, dashed towards Kael's flock, which was settling down for the night. Chaos erupted. Sheep scattered in terrified bleats, dogs barked furiously, and the shepherds, alerted by the commotion, sprang into action. Kael, with his hardened experience, was among the first. He saw the lioness darting towards a group of lambs. Without hesitation, he raised his sling and, with a practiced whirl, sent a stone whistling through the air. It struck the lioness on her flank, not enough to seriously injure, but enough to make her yelp and swerve. Zar, witnessing the breach and the shepherd's immediate, decisive response, let out a thunderous roar. It wasn't a roar of aggression towards the shepherds, but a command to his pride, a warning to the young lioness. Then he did something extraordinary. He bounded forward, not towards the flock, but to intercept the renegade lioness, cutting off her path to the lambs. With a growl, he forced her back towards the edge of the plain, away from the flock. Kael, his sling still poised, watched in disbelief. The mighty lion, the very embodiment of danger, had intervened to protect his sheep, not for his own gain, but to uphold an unspoken agreement. The other shepherds, spears lowered, exchanged bewildered glances. Zar then turned to Kyle, his fiery eyes meeting the shepherd's steady gaze across the twilight-dusted plain. There was no aggression in the lion's posture, but a shared understanding of their predicament. Kyle, in that moment, saw not just a predator, but a leader wrestling with the heavy burden of responsibility, just as he was. The next morning, Kyle made a decision that astonished his tribe. He gathered a small, old, and weak ewe, one that likely wouldn't survive the harsh conditions much longer anyway. He led her to the very edge of the plain, where the lions often rested, and left her there. Then he returned to his flock, his heart heavy with the risk he had taken, but firm in his conviction. Zar, observing from a distance, saw the offering. He approached the ewe cautiously, sniffing it. It was a clear, unambiguous gesture of compassion, a shared sacrifice. He understood. The shepherd was acknowledging their suffering, offering a truce, a temporary solution that didn't involve a brutal conflict. From that day on, an even more unusual relationship developed. The shepherds, recognizing Zar's leadership and his unspoken agreement, would occasionally leave a sick or old sheep at the designated spot, never a young, healthy one, but enough to alleviate the worst of the lion's hunger. Zar, in turn, ensured his pride kept their distance from the main flock, understanding the delicate balance. The drought eventually broke and the plains blossomed once more. The wild game returned and the lions no longer needed the shepherd's offerings, but the memory of that trying time and the extraordinary understanding that had formed between Zar and Kyle endured. It was a testament to the fact that even between traditional adversaries, a bridge of mutual respect and understanding could be built, especially when faced with shared adversity. The roar of the lion and the cry of the shepherd's dog still echoed across the plains, but now, often, there was a subtle note of acknowledgement in their calls, a quiet echo of the unique truce forged in the crucible of a desperate summer.